Hello everyone and welcome to the Kootneeti's YouTube channel. I am Niranjan Marjani. Today we are going to talk about the Philippines. Recently, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar visited the Philippines and held talks with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, Teodoro L. Locsin. This visit comes a few days after the Philippines signed an agreement with India to purchase the BrahMos missiles. How important is this visit for the India-Philippines relations? Would it give a boost to India's outreach to Southeast Asia? And what impact would the BrahMos missile deal would have on Philippines' standing in Southeast Asia or South China Sea in particular? To discuss all that, we have with us Mr. McLain Gill. He is a resident fellow at the Manila-based International Development and Security Cooperation. He is a geopolitical analyst and author who has written over 80 publications on India-Southeast Asia relations and on Indian foreign policy. He is also the co-author of the newly released book, The Rise of Philippinization. Philippinization is not Finlandization. Mr. McLain Gill, welcome to the Kootneeti.
Thank you so much, Niranjan. It's a true pleasure to be here. And as I've mentioned you offline, being part of this particular program to discuss a very interesting topic, it's truly an honor to be here. Thank you.
And it's a pleasure for us to have you as a guest to discuss about India and the Philippines. So if I could start by asking about Dr. S. Jaishankar's visit to the Philippines, how do you look at this visit? How do you analyze this visit?
Thank you so much for that question. I believe that's an important question to set the agenda for today's overall discussion. Dr. Jaishankar's visit to the Philippines comes at a very opportune time, a very important and critical time, right after the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting in Australia. This year marks India-ASEAN Friendship Year 2022. And on top of that, the presidential elections are nearing in the Philippines. It's just right around the corner. And on top of that, the BrahMos deal was also made. And all these things line up accordingly, and the visit really represents the willingness from both sides to deepen their strategic partnership and move beyond traditional aspect and towards a more proactive level of engagement and interaction.
Now, the Philippines has signed an agreement with India for the purchase of BrahMos missiles. How important is this deal for both the countries?
Right. So when we talk about the BrahMos deal, we have to look beyond the deal itself. We have to look at the bigger picture in order to understand dynamics in terms of Philippine and Indian foreign and security policy. If we talk about India, for example, the Indian perspective would be very significant. It is currently top 24th in terms of major defense exporter in the international system, and India strives to significantly boost that number and increase its chances of reaching a target of $5 billion by 2025 in terms of defense exports, and at the same time relying on Atmanirbhar in terms of solidifying its self-sufficiency in terms of defense production. So this is an absolutely important and critical time for India and the Philippines as well. Now, this is also an opportunity for India to solidify its Act East policy, which is a significantly reinvigorated version of the Look East policy. And India has become more well-connected. Its economic and military power has significantly increased. Its normative and soft power has also significantly increased. And this is the perfect time to engage with countries in the Pacific particularly. Now, for the Philippines, this is absolutely important, given, of course, the level of and the degree of interest to diversify its military imports, its defense imports, and at the same time to solidify its position in Southeast Asia against, of course, a number of traditional and non-traditional security threats that are taking place not only in the periphery, but particularly in South China Sea, in the whole Southeast Asian region, and the greater Indo-Pacific. So this, I believe, is a very, very significant engagement between two countries.
India does not have equal level of engagement with all the 10 Southeast Asian countries, although Within the region, India does have engagements with the CLMV countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. But I always feel that India should add Philippines to this list. Now, it looks like after Dr. Jaishankar's visit and after this deal, India-Philippines engagements could increase further.
Right. So this is absolutely important. When we look into India's engagement with other key Southeast Asian countries, you are absolutely right that there is a clear asymmetry involved. India's relations with Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, for that matter, for example, Myanmar, really is of a more significant value in terms of level of engagements compared to how it was with the Philippines from the Cold War era to most of the post-Cold War era. However, positive signs have been seen since 2014 and the incorporation of the Act East policy. There have been several high-level engagements between the Philippines and India. Prime Minister Modi's visit, President Ram Nath Kovind's visit, and of course the Philippines being part of the as a guest during the Republic Day of India. These are all very significant aspects. And on top of that, India's support for the Philippines in maintaining the stability and security of its sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea, the Philippines' ability to address terrorism within the country. India has been a stark supporter of that. And India has also expressed its willingness to take part in the capacity building of the Philippines. And this is very crucial, particularly in line with India's goal to, of course, project itself as a responsible stakeholder of the rules-based Indo-Pacific, and at the same time, present itself as a security provider in the region. And this really coincides. Both countries have similar perceptions and visions in maintaining the peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Both countries adhere to democratic values, and at the same time, both have similar threat perceptions, and this can be significantly useful in further enhancing the relationship between India and the Philippines. However, I always mention that, of course, consistency is necessary. As we have seen that consistency plays a big role in forging robust relations in the international system. India is well positioned to present itself at the same time as a significant alternative amid the deepening power competition between the United States and China. India's vast market, India's military capabilities, its economy, its economic size, and of course, adherence to strategic autonomy is very important amid the polarization of power and influence in the region. And India really presents itself as an unbiased and a neutral, and of course, a proactive and optimistic development partner and defense partner.
How would procurement of BrahMos missile impact the Philippines' standing in South China Sea?
Right. Now we have to understand the BrahMos export variant is at 290 kilometers. So it is significantly less compared to the other variants, such as a 500-kilometer one. And however, due to the restrictions imposed by the missile control regime, missile export regime. And on top of that, the export version has a speed of Mach 2.8, which is pretty impressive in terms of its ability to target advanced aircrafts, for example, and the difficulty for modern air defense systems to intercept it. Now, given these numbers, of course, we have to also understand the capacity of the Philippines, its defense infrastructure, the budget in terms of purchasing a number of defense equipment. Now, we have to balance that with, of course, the threat that it is receiving, particularly from China's assertiveness. Now, China's defense budget clearly outstrips the defense budget of the Philippines largely, and its modernization, its technological advancements are increasing day by day. Now, we have to factor these in. We can't say that the Philippines has the BrahMos, that's it. It's able to do what it wants to do to protect its sovereign rights in the South China Sea. We have to understand that there's still a long way to go to be able to achieve that significant level of deterrence towards an assertive China. However, what this means, though, is that India has significantly tapped into the defense market of the Philippines. Now, there is a chance for India to maximize its capacity building efforts for the Philippines. And there have been talks currently about other defense systems. There have been talks about India exporting a number of equipment and technology towards the Philippines, which would really complement the Philippines' military modernization process. And significantly, one more point to add is that the Philippines shift from a traditional perspective of its military to that really prioritizes the Navy and the maritime domain is of absolute importance. And this is something where India can take part in, considering that India's doctrine, which has been espoused by Prime Minister Modi, Sagar, is relatively complementary to the visions and interests of the Philippines. And this is something that both of them can work on together for the long term. But again, engagements need to be consistent on both sides to be able to maximize each other's potential in harnessing an effective level of partnership.
Dr. Jaishankar's visit to Philippines comes after the Quad foreign ministers meeting in Australia. It is interesting to note that the concept of the Quad was revived in 2017 in Manila, Philippines, on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Do you see any possibility for the Philippines to cooperate with the Quad in the future or become a part of Quad Plus mechanism?
You are absolutely right. The timing is impeccable in terms of, in 2017, as you've mentioned, being in Manila, and after the Foreign Ministers Summit, the Foreign Ministers meeting, Dr. Jaishankar arrived in the Philippines to discuss about the furthering of strategic partnership. Now, this is absolutely important. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the Quad, espouses a similar perspective that the Philippines has in terms of securing the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. Of course, the Philippines is also constrained at the same time to go on full force in supporting and engaging with the Quad as a collective framework. And that reluctance really comes from its larger neighbor, much larger neighbor, China, who is quite negative about the role of the Quad in the Indo-Pacific. And this makes it difficult for the Philippines. However, there are good signs that have been seen. A few years back, India, Japan, the United States, and the Philippines conducted maritime drills in the South China Sea. This is significant. And on top of that, there have been significant improvements in terms of Philippines-U.S. relations, with the Balikatan going in full force. And these are very good signs. The Philippines' relations with Japan are fantastic. And the Philippines' relations with Australia are also towards an upscale, towards a positive trajectory. So this really means something in terms of the Philippines' willingness to engage with the Quad countries. Now, India in this particular mix comes at a very interesting time. Again, we go back to the concept of strategic autonomy. While it is much more abrasive for the Philippines to engage with the Quad as a Philippine Quad framework, that might receive some negative complications from China, being that they are locked in a particular dispute in the South China Sea. China is a major trade partner of the Philippines. So there are several significant implications towards the Philippine national interest with that particular move. However, the Philippines will be able to engage bilaterally or trilaterally with the Quad members. And India serves as a very prominent position because of its strategic autonomy. And the fact that the Philippines, by engaging with India, would be less aggressive than the Philippines engaging with Quad per se as a whole collective institution. And however, the benefits that it would reap in terms of engaging with India in a deeper sense would be that of engaging with the Quad as well, as India is a major pillar of the Quad and significantly complements the vision of the Quad in maintaining the rules-based order in the region. So India is a significant factor here. And the meaning of Dr. Jaishankar and Foreign Secretary Locsin is definitely important. And in fact, the Department of Foreign Affairs released a document that really emphasizes that the meeting between the two foreign ministers really signifies the deepening of an Indo-Pacific partnership between the two countries. So we're all heading towards the right direction here. And I think that this is significant.
Now, the Philippines is the only Southeast Asian country to challenge China's territorial claims in an international tribunal, which ruled in favor of the Philippines. What has been the Philippines' approach to its own sovereignty since then, considering that China continues with its expansion and encroachment in the West Philippine Sea?
Absolutely. And the mere fact that the Philippines has banked on the tribunal is a significant reflection of the Philippines' adherence to the rules of the international system, to the rule of law, to international law. And this really showcases its willingness to work within the system of the rules-based Indo-Pacific. And however, there have been statements with the current administration that many may seem to be rather cautious of its partnership with the United States and gearing more towards China. But again, it's necessary to base it on empirical practice rather than merely statements. Perhaps we can talk about this later on, but particularly in terms of the negotiations and, of course, the capacity of the Philippines to secure its sovereignty, the Philippines continues to engage in diplomatic protests against China. For that very matter, it continues to consolidate its efforts on the regional level bilaterally with key defense partners and development partners. It is doing its part really in terms of its capacity to make itself heard in terms of the asymmetry involved in the South China Sea. Now, in relation to the book that I have co-authored, The Rise of Philippinization, it clearly outlines what the Philippines' future trajectory is, given, of course, the intense power competition between the United States and China, and the Philippines' sovereign rights being compromised in between. Now, being an ally of the United States and a major trade partner of China, who is in fact an immediate neighbor of the Philippines will currently have to posture quite cautiously, given, of course, the repercussions that can be seen if the Philippines right away goes for a more aggressive or assertive policy to secure its sovereign rights. Now, what the Philippines is doing is that it's consolidating its material capability as a middle power of Asia to significantly improve its standing in the regional and the global level, to be able to make more adjustments in the future in terms of the possibilities of more assertiveness from China. So this is really a long-term process that we have to look into. The process of Philippinization, which we are trying to explain here, is something that is not instant, it's not overnight, it is a long-term process that the Philippines will need to incorporate, given, of course, the geopolitical realities that it is facing with the United States and China.
And continuing with Philippines' relations with the United States and China, President Rodrigo Duterte is said to favor China more than the US, and he also considered canceling the visiting forces agreement, but restored it after US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's visit. So could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, and I think this is a very important point to elaborate for that matter. It's because, again, we have to base our understanding on the empirical data, on the hard evidence that we can see, and not really base it too much on the statements that are being made. Those statements are important, but we also have to balance it with what is happening on the ground. Now, in terms of that, the foreign affairs, foreign policy, and defense establishments of the Philippines have significantly incorporated the United States in their equation in the region and on the global level as well. The United States in the national security policy of the Philippines from 2017 to 2022, they recognize the United States as a stabilizing force, and it is also included that the Philippines is also wary and cautious of the rise of China. And this is, I think, very important to understand what the current administration is working on, particularly on this particular aspect. And though the current administration has on several occasions provided stark and negative comments towards the United States, we have to see that the recognition, of course, of the balance of power dynamics has compelled the Philippine government to maintain the visiting forces agreement. And in fact, the balikatan between the United States and the Philippines will now be presented in full force this year. And this is a significant moment, of course. And Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. has also supported a stronger role from the United States in Southeast Asia. And on top of that, the Philippines, through the Foreign Affairs Department, has also supported major security arrangements, particularly the AUKUS. They consider it to be a stabilizing force that would actually balance rather than provoke the current international order. And this is very important because, as we can see, China is very cautious and negative towards the Quad, the AUKUS, and all that. And the Philippines has come out in the open. In fact, one of the few ASEAN countries to publicly support the engagements and the configuration of the AUKUS. And this is absolutely important. And this adds to that particular point. And the Philippines-United States alliance is well intact, despite the provocations that have occurred in the past. However, we have to understand that no alliance, no partnership is perfect. There will always be room for improvement. But to say that the Philippines has jumped in the bandwagon of China at the expense of the United States, I believe is incorrect. We have to look into the hard evidence, data, and the future trajectory. And I feel that the Philippine-US alliance will continue to blossom despite the many obstacles that they may face.
Coming back to the BrahMos missile, this is a joint venture between India and Russia, and both India and Russia have their own perceptions of the Indo-Pacific region. Can we say this deal means indirectly that Russia would pursue a strategy different from China and more aligned towards India?
That is a very important and very critical question as well. First, you have to understand what is India's vision of the Indo-Pacific. India's vision of the Indo-Pacific really banks on the concept of inclusivity, an inclusive Indo-Pacific. And this means that India is willing to incorporate major players that are not traditionally seen in the mainstream to be part or a major part of the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Philippines has in fact invited Russia publicly in terms of engaging in the Indo-Pacific construct. However, Russia, looking into Russia, for example, Russia, of course, is constrained to adhere to the construct of the Indo-Pacific. It promotes a larger Eurasian vision of the geographic space. And of course, this is brought by geopolitical aspects of the international system. Of course, the Russia-US power competition, particularly now that is unfolding in Eastern Europe. And of course, we can look into Western Europe being wary of Russia, despite countries like Germany, for example, continuing to engage with Russia in terms of energy security. For example, with the initiation of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So these are all very important factors. Now, what it means is that we have to understand at the same time the dynamics of Russia-China partnership. So because of the constraints that Russia is facing from the West, it has no other option but to move closer towards the orbit of China, considering that China offers a significant alternative in terms of economic benefits for Russia. However, this does not mean that their partnership is rosy, as many sort of highlight in several commentaries of a possible further alliance of Russia and China, New World Order. Russia and China have a number of security issues as well. Central Asia, for example, Russia's Far East is another example of that. And of course, other areas of great importance to Russia is also something that is of interest to China. And there are several security issues that they face. However, the partnership is a necessity for Russia because it needs to engage economically as well. And because of the constraints of the West, it is pushed further within the orbit of China. And India is well aware of this dynamic as well. And this is why India seeks to engage with Russia. As we can see, the partnership between India and Russia is not like the partnership between Russia and China. India and Russia share a time-tested, historic, practical partnership with mutual trust and sensitivity towards each other's interests and insecurities and concerns. And both countries have been steadily improving their bilateral relationship, despite, of course, a number of obstacles, particularly from China or those from the United States, as India is a major defense partner of the United States as well. But India and Russia still try to maintain that level of balance in their partnership despite external factors. So that level of inclusivity that India continues to project is necessary for Russia. It is a reflection of its willingness to partner with Russia. President Putin's visit to India last year, December, really reflects on this, and the fact that both of them are willing to expand their partnership in Southeast Asia, in Central Asia, really shows that both of them align in a number of perspectives. And the flexibility from both sides is really significant. For example, during the Galwan Valley clash, Russia did not supply China with the S-400s as it requested. So it really shows a sensitivity towards India on that particular scale. And on top of that, we have to understand that the partnership, of course, will be channeled by the geopolitical configurations of the international system, of the region as a whole. So to say that, but again, we have to understand there is a diversity in perspective. So India and Russia might not agree on the construct or the concept of the region, but both are willing to partner and to cooperate within the geographic space of the Indo-Pacific. And both are willing to engage with partners in the Indo-Pacific. And this would also be beneficial for Russia to be able to integrate more closely with its partners in Southeast Asia, as India plays a central role there as well. And ASEAN countries look at Russia in a favorable light because, again, like India, does not have any vested interests, and it seeks to present itself as an alternative. And this is an area where they can work on. However, the factor of China, for example, will continue to loom and limit, of course, Russia's involvement in partnering with India in Southeast Asia. But then, time will tell how the stories will unfold.
And a question about the presidential elections in the Philippines, which are going to be held in May. How much does regional geopolitics feature in these elections, and how would the new president and the new administration impact Philippines' strategic approach?
Right. Whoever the president may be, the Philippine position, the Philippine direction will always be towards being part and being in the context of the current geopolitical configuration of the region. Whether the presidents may differ in terms of individual perceptions, we have to understand that the structural impact of the international system will compel the Philippines to inevitably maintain its interests, its security interests, and safeguard its sovereign rights. Now, we have seen this, as I've mentioned earlier, during the initial stages of the current administration in 2016. There have been talks of a decoupling from the United States, or shifting gears towards China, for example. But because of the balance of power dynamics and the structural factors inhibiting the region, we can see that there was more continuity in maintaining the alliance with the United States. And of course, in engaging to preserve and safeguard its sovereign rights, the degree may be varied. Some presidents, of course, there has to be a mix between structural and individual unit level motivations. So there may be delays in realizing this, but the effects of the structure nonetheless would be significant on shaping Philippine foreign policy, Philippine security policy. So we are expecting more of this to come. In fact, Secretary Locsin has mentioned to Dr. Jaishankar that we are looking into more significant exchanges between India and the Philippines, particularly in 2024, where they will be celebrating their anniversary of their partnership. So we are looking towards a level of continuity on the important factors, though there may not be that level of continuity in some factors, in some minor intricate factors. But if we look at the overall pattern, if we look at the overall dynamics, we can see that the Philippines will be heading towards this particular direction of what I call Philippinization, of maintaining strategic balance, and of course enhancing its way forward by consolidating material capabilities. So this, I believe, is very important, and it's something very interesting to look at, particularly how the Philippine-India partnership will blossom in the years to come. So again, I can't say this enough. Consistency is a definite for both sides, for all sides rather.
Well, Mr. Don McLain Gill, thank you for your time and for speaking to the Kootneeti.
Thank you so much, Mr. Niranjan, and being part of this very informative discussion with you for Kootneeti is very, it's an honor for me, and I thank you for the invitation, and I look forward for more engagements.
Sure, and it's a pleasure for us, and we also look forward to more engagements with you. We hope you found this interview informative and insightful. You can tell us what you think in the comment section below. You can also follow us on various social media websites, the details of which are on your screen. Thanks for watching.